Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams and that was a nice gentle opening. Nothing else matters, and the lyrics in that mean a lot, and it makes a change from head-banging opening. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Right, we have a fairly packed and full show. Been an interesting week in many ways. Quiet in many aspects, but not in others, and we have a bit of intel, not as much as last week, not as booming as last week, but interesting nonetheless. A number of op-ed pieces and a new thing for THI Solutions. So look forward to that in the second hour. Right, let's get into the links and the emails and stuff, what the show's all about. And the link to listen to the show is www.spreaker.com/user/8955881. And you can also listen live on the articles website called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. All the archives of the shows on there, including, if you're new to this show, the must listen to section, and if you listen to them in order, you will catch up what this show's all about, and all the different terminologies and the UK-isms and whatnot, and the funny quotes as well. Right. So that's thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and a Facebook social media alternative, which is now thankfully catching on with many others. Nice to see the OYM lads on MeWe now, and that's mewe.com. And if you're struggling to find Truth, Honour and Truth, Honour, Integrity, there's an email for the show which you can send comments and questions to, and also send an email to join the MeWe, and that is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. And for those in Europe, honour is spelled the American way, without the U. And we also have the People's Club donations website link for the foundation, and that's thepeoplesclub.org. Right, let's get into, where is it? I'm going to keep that for later on. Let's get into some of the news that's been going on. Again, you're struggling which ones to pick, but I always like to put in stuff that is kind of topical, and we have plenty that's topical. I've also been doing some, I spent some time over the weekend doing some research, and I'll have that in the second hour as well, how it all ties in. Right. Mr. Trump didn't join his wife at the weekend in attending the memorial service of the former First Lady, Barbara Bush, matriarchy of the political dynasty that Trump often clashed with during the election campaign. And we said last week when I wrote this piece that Trump would not attend to avoid disruptions due to added security and out of respect for the Bush family and friends attending the service. Yes, there's a lot of added security issues currently surrounding Mr. Trump. Some people in the one of the agencies want to take him out, and we have the emails. Trump spent the weekend in Florida during Saturday's funeral in Houston for the wife and mother of the president, and flags have flown at half-staff over the White House and also at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida since she died last week at the age of 92. Trump added his voice to the tributes, and also offered his condolences to the Bush family, calling her a titan in American life. Her presence and character were engraved into America's identity, yet its current identity, but not the real identity, in my opinion. And like I said, issues of safety and security were the main reason, given certain agencies were plotting to assassinate him. Well, maybe Mr. Trump doesn't want to deal with rogue element phonies. Who knows? Emails that were reviewed by Fox News in February suggest the FBI and the Department of Justice worked together to craft a response to a key development in the Hillary Clinton email investigation, amid newly raised Republican concerns concerning level of coordination between the two agencies during the probe. Yes, there is no coordination between all the different agencies except the Five Eyes group. And the emails concern the period after 22 messages with top secret information were found on the former Secretary of State's personal email server. The Republican Mark Meadows cited them in a letter earlier this week, claiming former FBI Director James Comey testimony to Congress, in which he downplayed FBI/DOJ coordination on the Clinton case. Yeah, right. And this may be at odds with documents suggesting frequent coordination. Comey specifically said in public testimony that he did not coordinate with the DOJ for his July 2016 public recommendation to not pursue charges against Clinton. He should be fired just for that. Indeed. Meadows, however, pointed out to a series of messages he claims indicate potential coordination at several crucial moments of the investigation, including the July statement and the period in February. While the FBI is part of the Justice Department and communication between the two agencies is inevitable, Meadows' letter also suggests that some at the FBI were concerned about the perception it was not acting independently in a politically explosive case. Yes, it wasn't. They were all working for her. North Korean leader, as we forecast in this show a long time back, has now declared that he will suspend nuclear and missile tests starting last Saturday, and that he will shut down the site where the previous 6 alleged nuclear tests were conducted. I'm not anywhere near certain that they were nuclear. I don't think they were. That's my personal opinion. The surprising to the Portal people anyway, that's the news media, surprising announcement comes just 6 days before Kim is set to meet with the South Korean President, Mr. Moon Jae-in, a precursor to what it will be a historic summit between Kim and President Trump. Negotiations have already been going on a long time, I can tell you that for nothing. But the US President is officially set to meet Kim at the end of May or the beginning of June, and a location has not yet been set. That may become rather difficult, that location. There's a lot going on. Both Moon and Trump have been saying that North Korea is now willing to denuclearize, a term that means different things to the two sides. North Korea has agreed to suspend all nuclear tests and close up a major test site, and Trump tweeted shortly after the announcement from Pyongyang, "This is very good news for North Korea and the world. Big progress. Look forward to our summit." It is the precursor to that is Mr. Pompeo. There was 2 reasons he was in the Philippines. I will there's a piece later on, or the other reason. And there's a lot of this going on now, dual purpose for certain travels and certain meetings. The UK next, and the husband of the Nazi leader Theresa May, Philip May, it's been disclosed, is a senior executive of Capital Group, which is an investment firm who buys shares in all sorts of companies across the globe, including thousands of shares in the world's biggest defence firm, Lockheed Martin. And according to a report, Philip May's Capital Group owned around 7% of Lockheed Martin in March 2018, a stake said to be worth more than $7 billion at this time, whilst other sources say Capital Group's shareholding of Lockheed Martin may actually be closer to 10%. Of course, on the 14th of April, the Prime Minister Theresa May sanctioned British military action on Syria in response to an apparent chemical attack on the city of Douma, which is a complete and utter load of drivel, period. There was no chemical attack. And airstrikes that saw the debut of a new type of cruise missile, the JASSM, J-A-S-S-M, produced exclusively by the Lockheed Martin company. And the debut of this new and incredibly expensive weapon was exactly what the US President Donald Trump was referring to when he tweeted that the weapons being fired on Syria would be nice and new and also smart. Though every single JASSM weapon used in the recent bombing of Syria cost more than $1 million per piece, and as a result of their widespread use during the recent bombing, the share price of Lockheed Martin soared. Go figure. And consequently, with the airstrikes in Syria having usually boosted Lockheed Martin's share price when markets reopened on Monday, Philip May's firm subsequently made a fortune from their investment in the defence giant. Yep. It's fairly obvious that weapons manufacturers such as Lockheed Martin stand to benefit financially from sales and subsequent use of their weapons in war, and the dramatic surge in the share prices of defence contractors since the so-called war on terror, they may spell it T-E-R-R-O-R, the real term is war on terror, T-E-R-R-A, like war on us, which began in 2001, and they hoped that would lead to World War III and wipe us all out by 2012, which obviously failed, like most of their big plans have. And this is a testament to the gratuitous warmongering. But the fact that investment firms such as Capital Group, owned by Philip May, the husband of the Prime Minister, is also profiting from these bloodbath decisions, I find rather disgusting. I'm sure that all the people in the UK who are struggling financially think the same. Now here's the other reason why Mr. Pompeo was in Nepal. A 60-year-old Canadian humanitarian worker and former United Nations staff member was arrested in Nepal and is under investigation for child sex crimes. The Central Investigation Bureau of Nepal Police confirmed to Global News that Peter John Dalgleish was arrested Saturday on suspicion of paedophilia. UN staff member, humanitarian worker, remember Haiti, it's all the same thing. And the chief, Pushkar Karki, explained to Global News that the case against Dalgleish is before the court and he is being investigated for child sexual exploitation abuse. Mr. Dalgleish was taken from his home in a district north of Kathmandu, and police said in a statement 2 girls, 12 and 14, were rescued from the home. Police alleged children were lured with a promise of education and foreign travel before they were sexually abused. And authorities said in a statement they are investigating whether more children may have been victims, and it's rumoured that it was Dalgleish who also released the Clinton humour abetting snuff movie. You'll find a lot of ties in with that. Libya, the crude oil pipeline belonging to Al Waha Oil Company and running to Sidra Port was attacked and set on fire by an unknown terrorist group. yeah, causing the loss of up to 100,000 barrels per day, the state company said this week. And the National Oil Corporation confirmed the incident without specifying its cause. Local sources, meanwhile, said that the pipeline was attacked by a terrorist group. An explosion and fire broke out as a result of a terrorist act. They keep mentioning terrorists. Where have you heard that before? Yes, you, Mr. Rumsfeld, with your word magic programming. And it blew one of the valves on the 24-inch crude oil pipeline northwest of the town of Marada, which is roughly 500 kilometres east of Tripoli. Watch that closely. There's a lot going on with oil at the moment. And I think we'll have some more of that in the intel. So whilst Philip May, the husband of Theresa May, is making millions on war, this is life in the UK. It may shock some Americans, like Brits are shocked at some of the standards of living we have here. Whilst the media people like to portray everyone's well off and doing well, which is not the case. And many British families have no electricity, and some are going without meals, purely because they can't afford it. 2 surveys have revealed this week that the harsh truth of living below the poverty line raises questions for the government. Good luck with that. Citizens Advice and the Living Wage Foundation have revealed just how hard it is for those struggling across the UK. And according to Citizens Advice, as many as 140,000 households are without power because they can't afford to top up their prepaid meters. For the American listeners, in the UK, the electric companies installed slot meters where you put coins in to pay for your electricity as you use it, rather than receiving a bill at the end of the month, as we do here. In the UK, they have quarterly bills rather than monthly, and it can be quite exorbitant. So some choose that are struggling to go on these metered electricity machines. Except then when they have no money, they've got no electricity. Now these machines, whilst it's beneficial in some way, is that you can pay up front, but they're metered at a higher rate. So the kilowatt rate is higher, again hitting the lower end people who can't afford it. You know, this type of insanity defies belief to me. It's like people who have struggled with foreclosure, or they've got themselves into a bit of debt and then they try to get out of it. And what the credit people do? They give them higher interest rates. Perhaps you get more money back if you give them lower interest rates. That's common sense. Don't go there, Thomas. Common sense doesn't work. It's not that common. So they're saying there's as many as 140,000 households without electricity. And the Citizens' chief executive, Gillian Guy, said it's unacceptable that so many vulnerable households are being left without heat and light. She added that for some people, self-disconnection is easily managed, but for many others it is an extremely stressful experience that can have harmful physical and also emotional effects. And the Living Wage Foundation, a group that campaigns for fair pay across the UK, has revealed in its own survey that parents in poorer families and as many as a third of working parents on low incomes are skipping meals regularly due to lack of money. This was more a theme came up in the 1990s in the UK for the elderly. It was heat or eat, and that's life in Britain for the pensioners during the winter, which is pretty much 5 months of the year. They only had sufficient money to afford heat, so they went without food, or they chose to eat on less heat. It's scandalous. Now, around half of those families who have fallen behind with household bills, the Living Wage Foundation suggests that the unofficial living wage is £8.75 an hour, which is £12.31 an hour, which is about a third higher than America. And it jumps up to £10.20, which is roughly $14 if you live in London. It's a lot more expensive. It's like living in New York. And more than 4,000 employers offer this wage. And the National Living Wage, which was introduced by the government in 1998, is the legal minimum wage that must be paid to workers over the age of 25. The youth can just, it's almost like pocket money, isn't it? Well, that's the way they think anyway. But on April the 1st, the rate rose to £7.83 an hour, which is roughly $11. And the investigation also found that 43% of those struggling had fallen behind on household bills, 29% had fallen behind on mortgage or rent payments, and 37% had topped up their monthly income with a credit card or a loan. Over 50% had borrowed money from a friend or relative to keep them going, while 30% had walked to work as they couldn't afford to catch transport. That's life in Britain in many, many areas. You know, two of the richest countries in the world, and they can't afford to look after the people. You know, the taxes in, I know we complain about taxes in America. You know, the sales tax here is 6.5–7%, depending on which county you live in. The sales tax in the UK is 20%, and they're talking about increasing it to 22.5%. Yeah. On top of the 14% that comes out of the wages for the national insurance, for the health and the benefit system. Awful lot to pay out before you have any money to yourself in the UK. Former Irish Prime Minister Bertie Ahern walked out of an interview this week with German broadcaster DW after being questioned about the findings of the Mahan Tribunal. The Mahan Tribunal was a report into corruption in the Republic of Ireland's planning process. Go figure. It found out that Mr. Ahern had failed to truthfully account for a number of financial transactions. Just a number. I would say it was a rather high number. It did not make a corruption finding against Mr. Ahern, and Mr. Ahern has always denied any wrongdoing and rejects the findings of the tribunal. When he was asked about the issue, he told DW's Conflict Zone programme he was quite happy his name had been cleared, and the tribunal gave its views and I gave my evidence, and I was very happy with the evidence, and the tribunal's over. I've dealt with that issue and I'm not saying any more, and subsequently walked out. Yeah, they don't like it in the face. They just don't like it. If you see them along the road, get in the face. Let them know we're not happy. You know, far too many of them are allowed to walk around uncontested. You know, you don't have to be violent and you don't have to be foul-mouthed either. You just have to tell them that they're not acceptable, including all the bloody politicians and agencies. Mitt Romney, like a blast from the past. Talking about fraud and corruption. Mitt Romney. I wonder when all his stuff comes out. Anyway, last week he didn't win the Utah Republican Party's nomination. Oops. Meaning now he must compete in a June primary election as he seeks to replace retiring US Senator Orrin Hatch. After a rather wild and raucous day of voting at the Utah GOP convention, the former Massachusetts governor and the 2012 Republican presidential nominee was unable to win the 60% that he needed to head the November ballot unopposed. And subsequently, when none of the 12 candidates were able to cross that threshold, the party continued with successive rounds of caucus voting until one candidate reached 40%. On the second round of voting, Mike Kennedy emerged in the lead with 50.88%, and Romney came a close second with 49.12%. So those two will now compete in the primary, which is set for June the 26th. Brazil. Where are we? Yeah, we're doing okay for time. You're going to start hearing a lot about this particular company. Those in Brazil will be rather familiar with it. But this is going to be a massive, massive can of worms when it finally breaks. And it's a corruption probe that has left politicians around the world looking over their shoulders. Prosecutors in a dozen countries are untangling a massive web of corruption that ran across a continent and further afield. Illegal payments may have sloshed through presidential campaigns, boosted the careers of political top brass in country after country, and also oiled the wheels of a worldwide construction projects, including motorways, gas pipelines and hydroelectric dams. And if you've never heard of a company called Odebrecht, you probably wouldn't unless you live in Latin America. That particular company is the Brazilian construction giant behind the venues for the 2016 Olympics, which many might remember ran into financial issues and all kinds of charges and corruption. Well, this is a spin-off and involves a lot more. And the infrastructure for the 2014 World Cup and the metro system in Caracas, plus dams and airport terminals further afield. But anti-corruption investigators caught up with the company, and it admitted paying bribes in more than half of the countries in Latin America, as well as in Angola and also Mozambique in Africa. Odebrecht, which is Odebrecht, played a game of quid pro quo. I will help you pay for your election campaign if you make sure I get that building contract. That's how the current corrupt system works in all countries. And it's alleged that Odebrecht employees made connections with those in power and those who looked like they would get, or who would likely be getting in power soon, and wrote up contracts. They didn't particularly care which particular party they were trying to bribe. They just bribed everyone, it appears. And almost a third of Brazil's current government ministers are facing investigation. Oops. Including the foreign minister and the president, Michel Temer, chief of staff. And the president said he will suspend any ministers who are charged, but he is himself also facing an investigation. Will he suspend himself? Probably not. Unlike Mr. Ahern in Republic of Ireland, he denied all allegations of corruption and accused the country's judiciary of heeding rumours and destroying reputations. Yeah, right. The Vice President of Ecuador, Jorge Glass, became the highest-ranking government official to be convicted in the scandal when he was sentenced in December last year to 6 years. Prosecutors said he took $13.5 million in bribes from Odebrecht, while the people all starve in Brazil. Huge quantities of them as well. And Venezuela and Colombia and pretty much most of Central America. The Rothschilds. Fresh from failing with their army again. Operation Stupid. And also doing 2 fire sales of homes. They've now found another way to stay in the game and keep afloat with bundles of money. This time, Kate Rothschild, the banking heiress, has been left, according to her anyway, devastated after burglars broke into her home and made off with £500,000 of jewellery. Yeah. £500,000 just in jewellery that just sit on the bedside cabinet, as you do. Raiders allegedly entered the property in Barnes, southwest London, while her children were asleep. Doesn't mention she was there. Just leave your children behind. After locating her bedroom, they stole a large box containing all her valuables, including her engagements and wedding rings. That's a clue in itself. And various antique pieces betrothed to her by her rotten children family. Now, the 35-year-old ex-wife of environmentalist Ben Goldsmith discovered the break-in when she returned home from an evening out with her boyfriend, the entrepreneur Paul Forcan. Really, comment one is, who cares? Like they're destitute, the Rothschilds. Well, they are struggling a bit, but. And two, to Kate Rothschild, now you know how non-Rothschilds feel. You and your ilk have stolen off us every single day for well over 400 years. So if it was real and not, as I suspect, an insurance scam, good on the burglars, I say. New York's top bank regulator has now threatened to strip Standard Chartered Bank of its state banking license, saying the British bank was a rogue institution. Yeah, that has hid $250 billion in transactions tied to Iran in violation of US law. The New York State Department of Financial Services said Standard Chartered schemed with the Iranian government and hid from law officials some 60,000 secret transactions to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in fees for over 10 years. And was also accused of exposing the US banking system to terrorists, drug traffickers and corrupt sales. I thought that's what banks operated for. Seems to be these days. Now, this is not the first time that Standard Chartered has been pulled up for rogue transactions. It's not the first. And you want to know why they are involved in so many rogue transactions? Because it's the lead bank of the Carlyle Group, aka Bush. I hope they follow through and pull its license altogether. Maybe then we'll sell them for $1. So the Senate narrowly confirmed this afternoon Mike Pompeo to be Secretary of State, clearing the path for him to take over as the top US diplomat, just as President Donald Trump faces high-risk moments on Iran and North Korea. Mr. Pompeo, the outgoing CIA director, secured support from 57 senators, with 42 voting no. And this was one of the slimmest margins for that particular job in recent history. Every past nominee for the job since at least the Carter administration has received 85 or more yes votes. Big drop. He's expected to be sworn into office immediately and then to depart within hours of the vote for Europe on his first trip as Secretary of State. Mr. Pompeo, a former Kansas congressman, is expected to guide Trump's foreign policy. I guess, and I hope, he realises he's not in Kansas anymore, is he? Toto. Sears is closing another at least 24 stores, including 22 Sears and 2 Kmart stores. The closing stores span 17 states, including Arizona, California, Florida, Missouri, Ohio and Minnesota. And most stores will begin liquidation sales on April the 27th, which is tomorrow. And Sears has cut its store count in half over the last 5 years, and is quietly closing on at least 24 stores in 17 states, in addition to the 166 stores that the company previously said it would close this year. This also comes on top of Subway announcing closure of 500 of its stores this week. But, I wouldn't like members to be worrying about it because, the economy is doing just fine, according to everyone on the news. Just fine. You just get rid of 500 stores and 166 here. Well, don't worry about the economy, it's all working just well. Yeah, right, in the world of illusion it is. Sadly, we live in reality, not the illusion. Housekeeper, final news piece before we have a music break. Housekeeper Paul Ryan announced that he will retire at the end of his term next January. But it's been outed today about his pension. So whilst most American people are earning $9 to $15 an hour. Paul Ryan will be retiring on $85,000 a year. For doing what? And that's assuming he lasts through till January. Maybe a Mr. McCabe style event may hamper that, but we'll see. But for most of America, by contrast, pension plans are now becoming a distant memory. In fact, only 23% of workers now have a pension. And according to the most recent analysis from the Pensions Rights Centre, while in 2016 pension benefits provided income to nearly 1/3 of older adults. That's the problem with these politicians, they want it all. Perhaps this next song fits in nice. You want it all, but you can't have it. Hi all and welcome back. Short music break. And we're going to get into some intel now. There's been a lot about Iran. And what I will say, it's got absolutely zero to do with nuclear weapons or nuclear programs. Mr. Netanyahu has got other issues, and yet again it rears its ugly head: oil. There was a deal that pays the head imam in Iran that used to involve Netanyahu, the Bush group, go figure, and the Saudi group Aramco. And that deal has been going on for years, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, and also the people who invest in it. And what they were doing for the last 20 years at least is they are buying barrels of oil for $25 a barrel. So when it's $50 or $55, what it is now, they're making over 100% profit. And 90% of the world's oil is sold at the black market at $25 a barrel, and sometimes even less. But they're telling us it's $50 and $60, and the prices have to go up accordingly. No, they don't. So the oil barrel price is fictional. That's what we see on the commodities market. And so if they can drive up the price of oil fictitiously, they also can drive up the price of food and gas for the consumer, us. This is how they work. It's taken from both ends, and this is what the problem is with the world. They're not content with making 100% on a barrel of oil. No, they have to take a bit more off somewhere else and a bit more off somewhere else. But what it does show is the whole oil market is completely rigged. They're getting oil for $25 a barrel or less. But it appears what's happening now is they want to steal the oil for nothing. Not content with getting it for $25 a barrel and making 100% on it, doubling the money. Now they want to steal the whole lot. And it also appears from the latest deal to do with that oil is Mr. Netanyahu was cut out of the last Iranian oil deal. Oops. So that is basically what's going on with Iran. It's nothing to do with nuclear weapons or the nuclear program, and everything to do with oil, with likely a little bit of certainly the northern portion of Iran to do with the caliphate, in my opinion. Some people have been asking why we haven't seen more action yet, and the reason is, unfortunately, it's not the best of news, is the full military hasn't moved yet. And I will say full because it's not all of them, is because there are still clowns stuck up the backside of Pindar, is why, and still in bed with the Rothschilds. A message to those people: we are coming, whether you like it or not. And those people need to realise who pays their wages and which country they actually belong to. Because if they don't, it's time they step down and let real American patriots do the job you should have done a long, long time ago. As far back as 2001. I could go back further in time and mention 1967. Not only Vietnam, but when Israel attacked USS Liberty, you did nothing. And you're doing nothing now. But their time in control, these clowns, is coming to an end. Whether they like that fact or they don't. There is an indeterminate amount of time that they can last. They can't last forever. They know it, and we know it. And all they're doing is delaying the inevitable. And subsequently racking up their crimes against humanity, which they will have to face. UK, or the clowns in the UK anyway, not the people. There was a Commonwealth meeting which I had hoped one of my proposals put forward would come to fruition, but sadly it was gate crashed by the same clowns again. And the UK has now proposed to the African countries, or many of the African countries anyway, to become part of the Commonwealth. That's not good. There are some African countries who are already in the Commonwealth, and they appealed to the ones not to join the Commonwealth. Now, the ones who are in the Commonwealth are now being asked to renew their agreements. And the reason being is because their agreements with the Commonwealth all expired the end of last year. Except the Commonwealth didn't tell the countries this, of course, or the African leaders, the ones who went to the meeting in the UK last week. So there's another load of agreements that are now null and void. And it's up to the African countries to tell them to go and do one. Including the Dutch usurpers, the De Beers. The damage those people have done in Africa is fairly extensive. And what the UK Commonwealth has proposed, the RV people are not going to like this, is they're trying to make all the African countries switch to the British pound, including Zimbabwe. just like switching one for the other. Now this has a number of issues for different people. One, the African countries would be rolled into the Crown and the Rothschilds. Two, their assets would also come under the Commonwealth and shared wealth. Yeah, right, you all know how that works by now. We share our wealth with them, they collect it and use it against us. And also fail to disseminate it back to the people. And three, this will leave numbers of people stuck with so-called Zim notes, the Zimbabwe currency. Is it dongs or dings or dungs or whatever? Some pile of nonsense anyway. And like we've told the RV people, you can forget your payouts from Chinese elders and Rothschilds. There's another example of them basically stiffen you. Because now, having already convinced you to buy Zims, they're talking about changing it to pounds. And you people still think you're going to get a payout from these? They took all your valid money so they could dump the Zims. Like the dinars, same thing. You know, these people, or entities in some cases, have never, and I repeat never, given we the people anything back. Zip. For our labour and toil. You know, and like the story in the first hour, all we get given back is minimum wages or some other negligent amount that's largely below the poverty line and certainly below the average living wage for vast quantities of people. Of course, they take all the cream. And as per usual, they always have hidden clauses in the contracts as well. And this one was no different. You can guarantee that. And the hidden clause for the African countries is that they had to sign up for 499 years. Why is that, you ask? Because it's the same duration as the Manor World Holding Trust is why. So it's another way of them claiming all the in-ground assets. And as Tank said, only one is trying to develop and enhance all countries and its people. And one is trying to continue to collect all the wealth and subsequently wipe us out with it. I don't know how many more fruitless attempts or failed or lack of codes or it's coming this day and coming that day or the fact that they're now going to make Zim notes defunct altogether. The people in the RV community need before they actually turn on these people. You know, I've heard reports of people putting in, buying $50,000 worth of dinars and higher. Whole syndicates buying up vast volumes of dinars. And as it stands now, they're not getting a cent back. If that was me, I'm sure a lot of other people, they'd be hunting those people down. Echelon, the spying group, aka Five Eyes, you've been hearing about recently, is currently being run out of Australia and is still spying on Americans, but also they're trying to siphon funds from the Manor World Holding Trust. This is currently being addressed. For those unaware of who Five Eyes is. Well, actually it's 9, but there was originally 5. And unlike a cat that has 9 lives, this type of spy has 9 eyes. So they all spy on each other's countries and then pass on the information about the other country's people to each other. And the reason for that, it gets round the in-house country laws of spying on your own people. So Australia echelon will spy on Americans, or they'll spy on Brits, or they'll spy on Russia, or they'll spy on China, and then China spies on Britain, America and everyone, and then they pass the information on. But don't fall for the myth that the agencies are anything but working with each other. CIA, MI5, MI6, KGB and Mossad all working together under these 5 eyes. Like I said, it's actually 9 in total. So I will have more in a future show on this particular group and how many backdoors they've inserted and they've created in absolutely everything. And I mean everything. And yet it's sad and also hurtful to us that they are spending so much time and funds as well to hack and spy on us. But you know what? To me, it means they are very insecure people who are basically terrified of us. People only spy on others because they're frightened of the competition. Oh boy, are they spying on us. What does that tell you? They're absolutely terrified of the people finding out and rising up. And if only everyone else believed the same way and acted upon it, all this nonsense would vanish overnight. Following last week's announcement of the sale of the UN and all of its subsidiaries, I can confirm there's a lot of meetings going on currently at the request of the UN and IMF and the World Bank. And I was hoping we may get an update on that before the show, but we're still waiting for the outcome on that. That's pretty much the intel, although there is some more bits that plays into it. Tank did a piece last week highlighting why Trump and team have not yet acted upon and administered sovereignty and also handed over the Fed to the government. And he suggested this is an ongoing problem due in part to apathy and also a lack of direction, with a healthy dose of fear thrown into the mix. And I agree with all of that. I still think we may need a total outsider to operate as the figurehead of this and or any other country for that matter. The off-world entity known as M, who is no more, was removed back in November of 16, I think. What was it last year? November 17, yeah, 2017. And yeah, these psychopaths and programmed followers carry on like he's still here. It's long gone. And we need someone in place that is not based in commerce. I've said this before. Most people that are based in commerce are riddled in fraud, corruption, bribery and coercion. That's how they get to the top levels. They've all been involved in one of those four, if not all of them. And we certainly don't need military, who are also riddled in fraud, corruption, bribery and coercion, with an added humanity disaster card of them at the top end being riddled with fear and a total lack of compassion, empathy or basic common sense. And yet so often in many countries these programmed zombies are operating a world of blindness where the people only matter if they actually fight their unsane wars or pay their unsane taxes. There's no reason for us to be paying anywhere near the level of taxes we're paying. Of course, the military, and you look at the setup of it, and all trained as followers, not leaders, followers. From the bottom end soldier all the way up the ranks, and yet people expect these people who have followed all their life, who are told not to think. This is the military. For the people who served in the military will all know this. You're told not to think. Just follow orders and do as we say. And they go up the ranks doing the same thing. And then they get into leadership positions when they've been a follower through their whole profession. How does that work out well? Well, it doesn't. Because they've got no sense of direction. And this happens, I've mentioned this about meetings off-world. Every race sends their warrior types, people only interested in war or leading war groups. So they go into meetings with that type of mindset. You need to send a representative of your species that's not mired in trade and certainly not mired in militaristic dick-swinging contests. We've got bigger weapons than you. Biggest weapon is the clowns that turn up to the meetings. So you've got a military structure who are told not to think, just follow orders, and go through a range of drug and chemical testing like guinea pigs, to then suddenly come out and lead a country. And we wonder why they haven't acted upon anything yet. They're not capable. You're talking 50, 60 years of that type of programming. You need to bring other people in to rule in a different way. Well, not rule, lead in a different way. It's preferably someone who doesn't think it's wrong for one country is allowed to have weapons and another country they can't have them because we say so. It's childlike. And so what have we ended up on the internet with all these generals that are going to save America, like General Dunford? Yeah, right. Remember the predecessor, General Ham, was going to save America. What happened to him? And the last one, McMaster. They'll all come and save our country. Like bollocks, they will. You only save your country if you employ people with common sense. And people in the military at the top end have zero. Otherwise they would have acted a long, long time ago. Look at the damage. You know, these people have got zero conscience at all. They know their own troops that they're leading as the general are being drugged up to the eyeballs. They also know that those young soldiers are lambs to the slaughter, not to save America and its freedoms, but cabal psychopaths. Trump has to turf the whole top brass out. You want change in the military, and for them to do the right thing, he has to turf the whole lot of them out. Same with the politicians. They're all involved in the same commerce or lawyers who are also riddled in fraud, corruption, bribery and coercion. And we're expecting these type of people and these type of characters to save us. Don't think so. There's a quote, excerpt from Pao Chang's book Word Magic. It fits in with this. Stop relying on a saviour to save you. The saviour ideology was created by secret societies of the dark forces to enslave your soul. When you rely on a saviour to save you, you are basically telling the universe that the prime creator did not give you the spiritual powers you need to achieve spiritual freedom. This, in effect, is an insult to the prime creator. If you need to rely on a saviour to save you, you are not using your spiritual powers wisely, and you are thinking like a slave. And that applies on all levels, not just people in the alternative media or people in the government, people in the military. If you're waiting for General blah blah to come and save you, we need to save ourselves. And if there's barriers to saving ourselves, then they need to be removed, preferably peaceably. Next piece. Here's where I've been digging. And this all ties in. And it's to do with a number of things that have come up recently to do with the pedophilia and the consuming of children and the harvesting of children and the sexual abuse of children and other more heinous acts. Well, you're going to see a name, Maggie Lindsay Haberman, who is an American journalist who is a White House correspondent for the New York Times and also a political analyst for Clinton News Network. Now, she previously worked for Politico and the New York Daily News, where she was a political reporter. Ms. Haberman is linked with Podesta, said correctly, I know it's Podesta, Maria Abramovich, Obama, Anne, Humer, James Alefantis, the pizza man himself, and she's also linked with Alison Mack of Smallville fame, who was arrested recently, and she was a recruiter for the cult that this show exposed last summer, called NXIVM. Now, there's been links put out about Obama and a 10-year-old. And he was photographed several times with this same young girl, who was initially, at the first photograph, was around 10 at the time. And that child's name is Maggie Nixon. Now, this is same girl who last year set up a GoFundMe to flee to Thailand, of all places, following, in her words, spending my days in an intensive outpatient program for severe depression, self-harm and many other personal issues. Yes, indeed. But I don't think fleeing to Thailand, which is well known for underage prostitution, will serve you right, Ms. Nixon. And given she's from a rich family, it begs the question of why the GoFundMe. And anyway, Maggie Nixon's mum is Mary Nixon, who's the daughter of the Hollywood producer Angela Nixon, who died 2 years ago, and is remembered for the series One Life to Live, and also now the worrying title of All My Children. So Mary, who is the 10-year-old Maggie's mother, is also associated with James Alefantis of Comet Ping Pong fame. And another link in this is Jennifer Jonou, Joanou, who is a successful fashion designer in Los Angeles, which is kind of significant, aka Hollywood reasons, and then gave it up and moved to New York to do a photography, or take up photography. But if you look at her website, it would be what some would describe borders on exposure of naked children, with latent symbology in the pictures, handcuffing young kids fully naked or half naked in various poses, and one wonders why that hasn't been shut down. Jennifer Jonou. Now, I did a piece about Anne, Hillary Clinton, for those who don't know who Anne is, joining a coven recently, and decided to get some deeper details of this. And there is 3 CEOs listed for that particular group called The Wing. Now, my intuition felt that this was another NXIVM-style all-women's group, and possibly linked to Comet Ping Pong as well. Now, one of the CEOs, Audrey Gelman, was the first I looked into, and came across the quote at a political event in New York comptroller election between Scott Stringer and Elliot Spritzer back in 2013. It begs the question as to why she is knee-deep in political circles when the Wing project would happen to pull in $240 million in donations at its launch, and here is why. Commenting on the event was Howard Wolfson, a Democratic strategist who was Ms. Gelman's, one of the CEOs of the Wing Group, when she worked as a junior aide during the Hillary Clinton 2008 presidential run. See how all the dots connect? Ms. Gelman said by 2000, or Howard Wolfson said, she was so anxious to prove her mettle that she left Oberlin after her sophomore year to work on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Miss Gelman said, she was my hero. Really? And went on to say, I would have given up all my worldly possessions just to work on that campaign. What, like your soul? And Miss Gelman is also very close friends of Lena Dunham. Remember that name, it will come up. So we have Weinstein, NXIVM, The Wing, an all-female group allegedly celebrating women's power. Well, if their example of women's power is Hillary Clinton, they can stick their female power where the sun don't shine as far as I'm concerned. Bad representation, that is. Broward County, Florida, Necker Island and Richard Branson, Epstein Island, Backpage.com, the Bronfman sisters, Laura Salzman, Maria Abramovich, Maggie Nixon, who's the 10-year-old girl that apparently Obama was using, her mother, Podesta, and Huma Abedin, Haiti, and the Red Cross are all interconnected in one giant cesspool of depravity. All of them. There are ties with all of that. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is it? Another one. They're all covering up the same thing. And this is has to be stopped. And Tank again laid out what happened to the little girl today in his piece. How the little girl had her face filleted off, and also how easily that child ended up in that position because the authorities let down her mother due to overactive and insensitive cops, predatory social workers, closed shop foster carers, and psychopathic so-called elites, or the even more ridiculous term, famous. Famous for what? Being a bunch of vacuous prats is about it, really. Anyway, he put this at the end of his piece, and he's copped some flack from the usually easily offended victim status whiners, of which there are far too many in my opinion. But the most profound aspect of this great American tragedy is that we all know and do nothing. I don't think for 1 minute that Tank was referring to people in the alternative media. It may apply to a certain few, but it is a few. I think it was a general statement, which I think, to me, there's nothing wrong with that statement. What is wrong is now there is tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, who are now aware of it, but what are they actually doing about it? And that was basically what he was saying. We have exposed it, and certain authorities who have the capacity to research it themselves and act upon it and do something. And the main culprits in all of this is the NYPD. Why? Because they had that filleting video for 2 years now, and what have they done with it? They have a duty and a responsibility. That's who I believe Tank was getting at. Two years NYPD have sat on that video where the girl had her face skinned off. What have they done? Why isn't some of those cops come on radio shows and exposed it? Why isn't it all over New York? Why is it left to shows like this or blogs like Tank to put it out? And why haven't the military or anybody else or the agencies stepped in and removed these depraved psychopaths? Of course, today, all the juicy drama that was laid out by the Portal people, all for the benefit of the synths and their wealth, not ours. Trump slept with a porn actress continues, like who cares? And Bill Cosby was back in court and was found guilty. Begs the question why he was not found guilty the first time. Except it's all very well, but there are two people walking amongst us, whether they're doubles or clones or not, who have filleted a child's face and did unspeakable acts, all whilst that child was still alive. And the Portal people remained silent. It's our role in the alternative media, all of us, not just this show, to highlight it. Every one of us has the capability to bombard CNN, MSNBC, Fox and all the other Portal people stations and demand they put this information out to the public. That is something everyone can do. You know, if you can post on Facebook, you can post on news channels. So you get blocked. Big deal. If one person sees it and goes and looks at the evidence, you've fulfilled what was needed. The time for the sound of silence has long since passed, in my opinion. Hi all and welcome back. The sound of silence. You know, many of our group have exposed it and I'm pleased with that. But let's try and double our efforts. I know this is an emotive subject. I know the vast majority, even in the alternative community, are struggling with this this type of violence and behaviour. It's beyond all it's completely outside of anything rational. You kind of struggle for words in many ways. Well, people often say, you know, we're just one voice. Well, one voice can create a nice tune. If you get 100 voices, you have a choir. A choir always sounds better than one voice, doesn't it? And the same thing applies with this. You know, the idea of approaching the average everyday folk in the street with this type of news that Clinton and Biden skinned someone's face off. People are not going to believe it because they can't comprehend that level of evil. You know, they can't comprehend that we have no government, we have no Bill of Rights, we've got no constitution. So this type of stuff is kind of way out there. But they thought it was way out there when we exposed, and many of others in the community exposed, the crimes of church and state. The idea that churches and vast quantities of churches in vast quantities of countries were fiddling with kids 5 years ago was laughed at, remember. It's not laughed at now, is it? Why? Because we all spoke up. The problem we face, you know, people say, oh, everything takes too much time. Yeah, and trust me, I know that. You know, I practically have no life to bring these shows and keep up to date and be involved in the multiple hats that I wear, because it's the right thing to do. But the biggest problem we face is the portal people. We have allowed them. Yes, there's people who shouted at politicians, and there was a military guy who stood up in front of McCain and read out his treasonous acts. But the media people just seem to get away with everything, as though they don't exist. They need to be held accountable. They don't have the security that the politicians and the entourage the politicians have. And it's up to the public to make them wholly uncomfortable. And once again, I'm not advocating violence. I'm not advocating you effing and blinding at these people. You talk rationally. Are you comfortable sitting in that chair lying to 300 million Americans? Because we're not. You know, they have all got websites. All the news organisations which are run by 6 corporations, whether it's radio, newspaper or TV, they've all got websites. Everyone in the alternative community, not just THI, I mean everyone in the community, can spend 5 minutes a day bombarding every news station and push them into covering it. Because once the public starts seeing this information and some start looking into it, they will react. Because it's not as bizarre as it once appeared, because of the exposure of what's gone on with politicians both in America and Britain and other places. And so many in the church have been exposed, including right at the top end of the Vatican. It's not beyond the realms now that the UN is involved in trafficking. There was one arrested this week. So there's plenty of evidence to support that these so-called institutions that are supposed to look after and protect us are the ones that are doing it. We cannot be silent. See, the danger with this on a personal level, and so, I've seen some comments, I can't handle this type, and I do get it. But what you've got to remember is you've just created another shadow layer to yourself. And the only way to get rid of it is to spit it out. Why not spit it out to the very people who are blocking this narrative? That's your personal responsibility, in essence, dissolved. None of us are responsible for this. But we would be ultimately if many thousands or millions of people were aware of it and we did nothing. That makes us then complicit. Let's bombard the news people and force them into covering this nonsense. Ping Pong, Richard Branson and Necker Island, the Epstein Island, Backpage.com, Bronfman Sisters, Laura Salzman, Maria Abramovich, Maggie Nixon, Mary Nixon, Obama, Podesta, Haiti. You know, there was mass demonstrations in Haiti last week. Conveniently, the Portal people didn't cover it, calling for the arrest of Obama and Hillary Clinton. Oops. Red Cross, Broward County, Florida. They're in it up to the necks, not just in Parkland, but a whole heap of other stuff, if you look deep enough. Weinstein, Nexium, Ranieri, and what's her name? Who was arrested, Alison Mack. From all accounts, she's naming names, big names. But I still can't get my head around a female pulling in girls to be branded. I just can't get my head around that. 16,000 of them. That's the public figure. You'll know the private figure, it will be a lot higher. And this latest group, again out in New York, The Wing, Audrey Gelman, looking to her junior aide of Hillary Clinton. I can't remember. I was going to cover the other two that were who are the CEOs of The Wing. They're not good either, and they're also linked in with Comet Ping Pong. Complete sickos. Talking of New York, I've heard rumours, and that's all it is at this point. But I wouldn't rule it out, given what I said about a piece last week about the elites or elites wanting selective areas for themselves, not us. They're talking about building a wall around Manhattan now. You know my opinion on the wall. It did change because I was given different information, and now I understand why the wall with Central America is going to be built, and that's valid reasons. To me, I still think there could be different ways without creating a permanent wall. We have the solution. We bring home all the troops from all around the world and station them along the border with sonar placed at intervals, because then you can hear the rats scurrying through the tunnels and you just collapse them. Simple as that. If you're going to do illegal things, then just, it's their own fault, isn't it? You go into those tunnels at your own risk. But to me, if you're going to build a wall in America, there's a nice Nazi base in Virginia that fits the bill rather well. Why not build a wall around that and pour concrete into it? That would be a rather nice solution for us. Not for them, but a nice solution for us anyway. Rudy Giuliani has joined Trump's legal team. That's not a position a person I particularly would have put there, and I will continue to speak out unless further evidence comes up to suggest otherwise. Like last week, I did a balancing piece on Trump to do with Syria, And there's also, I explained, a possible map of appointments, highlight, expose and fire. And Mr. Giuliani may well come into that category at a later date. I would have preferred to have not seen him in Trump's team, but he's there. But let us not forget Mr. Giuliani and his role in coordinating and the removal of steel to sell to the Chinese on the day of 9/11. Not only was the steel removed, but vast quantities of human parts with it on the first day of 9/11. Mayor Giuliani oversaw what is basically the illegal destruction of the 9/11 crime scene and is criminally liable for the deaths of hundreds of emergency workers for not passing on prior warnings about the collapses of the Twin Towers. It's no wonder then that the fire department of New York so passionately detest Giuliani for his actions in disgracing their fallen brothers and covering up the 9/11 crime. Now, the Eric Lawyer, who's the founder of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, points out this week the massive operation to overhaul 1.5 million tons of debris and sell much of the steel to Chinese firm Boa Steel at discount prices was not just an overzealous approach to clearing the area, but itself a crime. And this all took place instead of looking for the injured or dead people. Giuliani bragged about how many trucks were going in and out overnight. 120 trucks cleared in steel and body parts. He just picked the whole lot up. Does that happen in any other crime scene? That's what people, there's still people who stupidly believe the story put out by the government and the agencies, or let's put it right, the deep state. But why would they remove chunks of the crime scene when there was people still to be rescued? Does that really make any sense to anybody? Well, if it doesn't make sense, it means they're covering something up, does it not? Fairly obvious deducement to all of us, but to them it just seems to pass over their heads. And we must not forget that Mr. Giuliani had also built a purpose-built bunker in Building 7 for such an event, at a cost then of $13 million. It was known as the Giuliani Bunker. But where was Mr. Giuliani when it all unfolded? Pier 92, not in his bunker. Oh no. Because he said that he was told the towers are going to collapse, quote, unquote. Except he never warned the city's emergency response teams that towers were going to collapse, did he? No. So to me, there better be a good reasoning behind this move, and fairly quickly, or any hopes pinned towards Trump doing the right thing will disappear from this host. Giuliani took remains of the dead and sold it to a Chinese steel company. He knew. Now, like I've said last week, it could be a strategy plan that I put forward last month. And if that's the case, then all is well. Giuliani is exposing, knowing he's a criminal, is exposing other criminals, and we get them all out the way. and then ultimately he gets fired and charged with his own criminality, then I'm fine. Like I said repeatedly, I don't trust politicians per se, any of them. They have no history of doing anything for and by the people. None. I'm more interested in actions rather than personalities, and the key is, are they operating for and by the people? And that has to be our only mode of operation in the alternative media. Not whether Trump's saving us or not. Are they operating for and by the people? I'll support anyone. You can put George Bush Jr. in the White House for me if he's doing the right thing. It doesn't really matter. They're just figureheads at the end of the day. But they have to be doing the right thing. And there's rather disturbing evidence that is building up over the last month, which doesn't augur too well. And for one, I'm not going to sit back and just ignore it. Like I said, there may be other strategic reasons for it all, but we must not forget the original. Giuliani's role in 9/11. Now, one question I asked my sources this week, for those of you who will be interested, my question was, is Trump arsing us around? And the answer came back was no. Like I said, I don't think the people of New York are going to forget Giuliani, and neither should we either. But if he does the right thing for now and pays his price later, then I'm fine with it. Well, first off, before I do this piece, I want to make it abundantly clear that there's absolutely nothing wrong or bad about being a Muslim or Jewish for that matter. What I have issues with is the control system using those labels and politicizing it and using it as an agenda against the same said peoples and others. I came across this week in my research, a group called Huma, H-U-M-A, which was started in 2004 by a number of interested alumni who felt that the Muslim alumni community could be strengthened by an official organisation. It was also envisioned to support the long-term goal of providing for a Muslim chaplain on campus and seeing the development of a masjid in the Harvard Square. Now, currently, this particular group has over 300 members spanning various schools and years, and Huma is a vibrant and active alumni organisation. And the mission of Harvard University Muslim Alumni, Huma, is to connect Harvard Muslim alumni and faculty and thereby to support Islam and Muslims at Harvard. Really? Question is Huma Abedin a stage name? Of course, we all know who her bed partner is. And given we think Anne is a droid, the anagram of Huma Abedin is I Bet a Human. Oops. Huma is not a normal name. It could be another example of them putting it right in your face. Harvard University Muslim alumni. Like I said, it's nothing to do with Muslims, and the same applies with the Zionist goons having anything to do with the Jewish people. They're not interested whether they're Jews or anybody else. And they're using these labels and politicising it against we the people, including Muslims and Jewish people, I might add. Jewish people are bigger pawns than we are. They've been told, remember, that they are the chosen ones. Wait till they find out they're not. Now, some of you will remember me referencing a group known as the White Helmets. Helmets being the operative word. Those in the UK will probably get that meaning more. Many were saying that these are a group formerly known as the White Hats. And my comment was yes, pointy white hats, as in KKK. Well, a report has come out this week of how much this group has generated via certain funding from 2016 onwards, I should say. And the funding that they've received in just under 2 years is $123 million, including received funds from the US State Department, Deep State, 3 branches of the UK government, the German, Dutch, Danish, Qatar and Japan governments. You can link them all together. UK, German, Dutch, Danish, Japan. Crowdfunding, website donations for services in Syria. But the 2 key aspects of this report that jumped out at me, all the money was being funneled via a Dutch NGO company called Mayday Rescue. For those of you who don't know, May Day is Beltane Festival Day. It's a ritual sacrifice day that the psychopaths carry out. Now, what was also interesting and disturbing in good measure is listed on the donations was a $2.4 million fund from the person known as Joe Cox. Now, people with long memories will remember I highlighted Joe Cox, who was an MP politician in the UK who was shot and stabbed multiple times to death 2 years ago. And yet these White Helmets received $2.4 million from their fund. Unbelievable. Of course, her death was attributed with the usual rhetoric, the triple-barreled name, which often comes up with these events. Thomas Alexander Mayer, spelled M-A-I-R, which is a derivative of the Germanic name Meyer or Meyer. And according to, for those people who are going to jump on me now for referencing Germanic names, here's why. According to authorities, Thomas Alexander Mayer was known to them. Check. He was also having mental health disorders. Check. And he was also a neo-Nazi. Check. And yet he just carried out and stabbed people and shot people to death, like all the others in Parkland and whatever. They're always known, and yet none of them were ever stopped. Funny that, isn't it? Well, actually it's not. And so suddenly people are now beginning to see all the connections to everything. They're all there if you look close enough. I turned on the TV on Saturday, I think it was, and unfortunately I ended up on Clinton News Network. I was about to turn it off, and I didn't last too long because of the levels of lies and stupidity. But they were haranguing Mr. Trump again, because he made a comment called, a comment saying breathing, to do with the immigrants. And they were making all kinds of insinuations of what that meant, and twisting words to suit their agenda. And this is the levels that these portal people go to. But it's also something I thought I would bring up and highlight our role in it as well. Now, breathing itself is a comment. It is common for the immigrants in particular to have more children. I'll explain why. But this is kind of a known fact once you know the figures that support it, and you can try and make out rogue connotations out of pretty much everything if that's your mindset. And this is the problem for society in the West. Everyone takes offence at far too much, and this is part of a direct strategy brought out by the controllers of this world called political correctness. You only have to look at the term to realise it wasn't something beneficial. You know, since when has politic ever brought we the people any benefits? Political correctness. It's all there. Now, I warned of this when it came out in the UK in the 1990s, that it was more to do with being nice or considerate to blacks. That's the way it was stated in the UK. May have been the same here. But it was not designed to be nice or considerate to blacks. Just no. What it was designed was to stifle discourse and good old-fashioned calling it what it is. It is what it is, as they used to say. An example of how stupid it was, and still is. You know, was calling it as it is was known in the UK of calling a spade a spade. Except that got banned as it was deemed a negative reference to blacks. Why? Because the term black as an ace of spades was cited. You know, how far are you going to go with that type of stupidity? So because you are black, you are connecting dots and making out you are a spade in a derogatory way because of a card suit. That's the gist of it. So, if a card suit is racist, why haven't we banned poker? Or any other card game? You know, how far does this level of stupidity have to go before we the people realise we can't go on in this way? You can't say the term black. You know, it went from the term Negro, which actually means black, to coloured. Then to black, which then, when I was back in the UK, the Chinese, the Asians and non-Africans and the brown people were in uproar as they didn't consider themselves to be black. Now, if that was the white people complaining, that would be classed as racist, and yet it wasn't to the Chinese, Asian, non-Africans and brown people. So basically what they then created is they got what they wanted. Everyone arguing with each other. And the people themselves, because of massive chips on the shoulders, carry the very policy out that creates it. We are pretty stupid of how easily we fall for their divisive agendas. It's like the N-word, which is actually a derivative of Negro, which actually means black. Negra in Spanish means black. This is the stupidity of it all. You're basically denying the fact that you are of a particular colour, the same colour you parade as Black Lives Matter. Well, of course they do. But so does everybody else's life matter. And then we have the stupidity of the N-word being banned. Fair enough. They thought it was offensive. That's fair enough. No qualms with that. But it was selectively banned. And therein lies the problem. As blacks still often refer to each other as the N-word. You only have to listen to some of their music for that. It's littered with it. So if it's derogatory, why is it still being used in their own communities? And why are we allowing that divisiveness to carry on? Is that not going against what the black people got so offended by? By calling each other the N-word. And therein lies a deeper problem. We go round and round in circles, deliberately looking for faults and mistakes in others by deeds or words. We forget to enjoy life and fight for real justice, harmony and collectiveness. That's why they bring out these programs. But it doesn't mean to say we have to enforce it. And if you are offended by this piece, it means you are lost. You've lost yourself into a program and have become part of the problem, not part of the solution. I could spend a whole show giving examples of what you really should be offended by, but pre-selected thought patterns surrounding words is not what all of us should be displaying. So Trump said breeding, big deal. We had a term in England that was used frequently for the Irish Catholics. They breed like rabbits. The Irish Catholics had a lot more children than the Protestants. Of course, that's now deemed offensive. But it was just a joke. But let's break it down. They breed like rabbits. That means they had sex a lot. The Irish Catholics. Is that a positive or a negative? All the men will go, yeah, that's a positive. Some of the women will go, maybe not. That produced more children. Is that a positive or a negative to bring more children into the world? Because I thought that's the point of being a family and also a mother. So the gist is Irish Catholics had sex a lot and produced more children, and yet because rabbits had sex a lot and bred more children, it's deemed as a negative. When actually means that the Irish men are more lucky than us Protestants. But it depends on your own perspective, isn't it? If you're going to make an issue out of it, you can make an issue out of everything that gets said. And that's why they brought in political correctness. It kills discourse. Because somewhere on the line, amongst the words, someone's going to find something to be offended by. So the term breeding is being, or was on CNN, is linked with animals. So they were suggesting that Trump's referring to immigrants as animals. And so in the liberal political correct world, that is offensive. But if you're going to go that far, let's ban the word education then. Because education means training of animals. Or let's ban the term human. Because if you look in the Black's Law Dictionary, the definition of human is monster. You don't believe me? Go and check it up. Look at the etymology of those words. So CNN turned round and says Trump needs to be educated. I could turn around and says, I find that offensive because you're referencing Trump to being an animal. Education means training of animals. See how easy it is to take offence at everything. But why are people not up in arms about those terms, education and human, being described in that way and being used openly in society? And more importantly, who created those terms? Humans are monsters, and if you're going to teach them, educate them, you're going to train them like animals. Now that's something to really get offended by. Who created those terms? But the other policy of bringing in immigrants is because the West in itself cannot sustain the Ponzi financial scam that they have brought about with an average of 1.1 children, which is what it is currently. Their whole Ponzi financial scheme relies on 2.3 children per family. So it was a direct policy of the West. I warned of this back in the 1980s in the UK, that Labour would open the borders. And they did. And bring in immigrants, particularly black and Latinos, and also people from Catholic countries, who, based on the sheer figures themselves, have more children than the Western world. This then props up the system. They make areas poor, then force people out of their natural habitat. Think Venezuela, think Guatemala. I can go on and probably mention another 100 countries they've done this in. Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, on and on it goes. We force people out of a natural habitat, and war also plays a role in this, and the so-called disaster events, natural or otherwise, also plays into this agenda. You see, like the Ouroboros, they chewed off from both ends in an attempt to desecrate the family, of which feminism, the political ideology, played a huge role in it. Female power. So women then chose to play a more, what is traditionally a male role, and were not having children till later in life, and some were not bothering to have any at all. That then failed their Ponzi scheme. So they chewed at both ends, and they've done this in so many different levels of society. They've chewed from both ends, and now they've got a problem because there's no solution unless they end their nonsense. And not only feminism played a role in desecrating the family, which then ended the 2.3 children per family, the explosion of rhetoric, promotion of, and rules all designed around the homosexuality theme. These were not about women or homosexuals per se, but about direct UN policy. Agenda 21, Agenda 30, it's all in there. And yet it had the effect of drastically reducing the child rate in the westernised countries. Chewed one end, chewed the other. They didn't have the foresight of seeing that as a direct action on something else, it creates an imbalance in nature. And nature always finds a way of correcting imbalance. But the statement of I get offended at people who get offended at offensive remarks, who are not really that offensive, but people take offence, as they are offended by everything potentially offensive that has not really offended anyone until they take offence at it. This type of insanity has to stop if we're going to progress forward. It has to stop. A spade is a spade or a shovel, and only the undereducated, and I use that term loosely given most of the world has been undereducated, would see that as a negative term. Political correctness has not worked too well for us at all. Shall I take... I don't think we're going to make questions. Let's have a quick song, and then I'm going to come back with a new piece of solutions. Let's have this one.
I played a different song in there.
Hi all and welcome back. Final portion. That last hour went quick. I could probably go on for 5 hours with this show, with a lot of information. We're probably going to skip Q&A tonight. I've decided to come up with some solutions, and given we kind of know there's top end people who are listening on this show, I think it's important to put it out into the ether, or the essence, for it all to be absorbed. I've mentioned a few solutions in previous shows, but here's two more. I'm also working on a fairly big proposal, which I may do in the next show, that has actually been worked upon currently, that will appeal to everyone who listens to this show, and everybody else for that matter. So look forward to that. Anyway, here's the first two that I would like to see put out into the ether, and maybe people can put their own attention to it, and that's how we end up manifesting it. Now, the first one is important to us all in the alternative media, people who listen to this show and many others. And I would like to propose to Mr. Trump a dedicated truth channel, prime time TV, not using celebrities and so-called stars. I think we've had enough of them and what they get up to, or coven promoted goons that are within our community. Yes, you, Mr. Wilcock, good and say that. But average people in the alternative community to be recognised for their role in exposing what is essentially a truth push, and subsequent exposure of the rogue elements and the crimes and criminality that's taking place right across this planet. Because at the end of the day, without all of us deciding something is clearly not right in this world, or with this world, and then finding out that that intuition was largely correct, and then went on and took steps to learn and expose it all, the controllers would have wiped us all out by now. And I don't say that lightly. They would have wiped us all out by now. That's the impact of the alternative community, despite all its ills. And they would have continued on with their transhumanism agenda. Now, one of the things I think most of us are getting tired of learning, and perhaps trying to discern who's telling the truth. Is Thomas telling the truth? Is Randy Morgan telling the truth? Is David Wilcock or Corey Good or Drake telling the truth? Who's telling the truth? And who is deflecting or diverting the truth? And the point is, why do so few in the community allow you to challenge their narrative? Because this show is always challenged. But so with that in mind, I would like to propose a prime time show dedicated to the whole truth of what actually took place, with no more ifs or buts or maybes, like they do with the ancient aliens. What if? No more what ifs. The direct, full truth. So how can this be achieved? Well, first off, the President would have to lower all levels of secrecy currently above his level, which is around 26 levels as I understand it. So the deep state would have to have gone down. And then all those secrecy levels, cosmic and all this fancy celestial type names that they have, for obvious reasons, for those of you who don't believe in ETs, down to presidential level. Has this been done before? Yes, it has. It was done by JFK with Khrushchev of Russia, or USSR as it was back then, in November of 1963. He died 12 days later. So an executive order to cancel all the secrecy levels, that way all the documents can be released to a team of paid researchers to go through the relevant paperwork and correlate it into a narrative for the show. So you would have a team of researchers would be required, and a number of speakers to deliver the information for the said shows. There could be different topics each week. And let's say the first show we did is, did we go to the moon or not? And all the papers proving it, and all the papers showing it how it was staged, would then be delivered to the team and then organised into a show. At the end of that particular show, there would be no more doubts of whether we did or we didn't go to the moon. A full-on truth channel. And in essence, that would tick off that particular subject off the ever-expanding list of the rabbit hole. And if the answer is yes, we did, it could also lead into spin-off shows of what we encountered there, what and who was already there, any structures, what is on the dark side of the moon, and why is it only facing one way to us. Now, subject 2 could be who really killed JFK. probably the most asked conspiracy theory. Now, that, of no doubt, will soil quite a few people's underpants in the agency. But this is the Truth Channel, and the truth is what will be delivered, no matter how uncomfortable. And what a show like this would do is provide so much more clarity for the people to go forward with. It's no more come and buy my plagiarised books or attend my conferences on bullshittery. Truth is what many seek, but too few want to walk through. That has to change for society going forward. And this is one way of doing it. And to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, the people need full transparency of it. We've already heard about how transparent we're trying to do the financial system. Why isn't everything going to be transparent? If you're going to really be for and by the people, Mr. Trump, then this is something that really needs to be considered. And let's end all the doubts and the conspiracies and just put the hard facts out onto the mainstream media. Then we'll all go forward with a much clearer picture than we have now. Proposal 2. What if there was a reorganisation to do with banks and mortgages? That would make it fair to most, beneficial to many, and a small number on the face of it, only a small number, would lose out but would gain in a roundabout way. Would you subscribe to that? Well, here's a possible solution to the Western world housing crisis. We're all now getting tired of the deliberate, and it is deliberate, boom and bust. And yes, some may have gained from the booms, but far too many lost from the controlled, deliberate bust. And here is an example of what they've done with the financials, and this applies to all forms of credit. They had installed a boom and bust of around every 7 years, and during the boom years, the credit released was exorbitant, and the people borrowed like crazy because it was boom time. Once they, after around year 6 to year 7, they have then ensnared, trapped sufficient people in credit or debt, and then they busted it. What happens next is they start increasing lending rates that were much lower when the credit was available, and everything collapsed, particularly homes, leaving many in over the heads, or quite often then homes with negative equity. And this is what they did, and they kept repeating it, and yet we were far too ignorant to see it for far too long, but this is what they were doing. But once the trust stopped the sieving of capital out of the trust in 2007, they could no longer use the trust for their own gains. And what was left was a whole heap of assets, well over leveraged, and nothing much of real value to garner anymore. And this is why we ended up in the current recession, which is now in year 10. And despite so many so-called financial experts, because that's a misnomer in and of itself, as real transactions are or were not made public. It's all done in mirrored accounts and off-screen ledgers and codes and all kinds of black books and red books and you name it. So quite how you can become an expert financially on what is basically an illusion is beyond me. And that includes Wall Street, the markets, currencies and mineral prices. All of them are an illusion. Like mentioned earlier, oil. The clans are getting it for $25 a barrel, but selling it at over 50. An illusion. So I hope that gives you a background on it, and I would like to throw it into the ether, an idea that would work for so well for so many people. So here it is. What if we ended the house boom and bust and made all homes affordable to the many, but preferably to the all? So my suggestion is to make all house prices based on the cost to build plus 10% builder's cost. Reviews for improvements to homes like additions, extensions, pools, garages can be adjudicated but rigid in price range. So let's say your home cost $100,000 to build plus a 10% builder's fee. So the home is $110,000 in value. That's the real value. Everything else is illusion. And yet you may have bought the house for $250,000. But what if the new mortgage is dropped to $110,000? That's the value of the house. That makes it not only more affordable, but the extra money in your pocket then goes into extra spending money in your own community, which then subsequently helps others. And yes, I can hear some complaining now. That doesn't help me, I've paid off my house. Our mortgage is less than 110, so it's not helping me. But there's your answer. You're only thinking of me. There's lots of others. And we have to stop doing that and think of an overall overview thing. Everyone gains at the end of the day, either directly or indirectly. So with homes in the range of $100,000 to $150,000, some of them would be less, of course, the older ones. The build cost, it would then allow so many others to be able to afford homes for themselves. That then is helping the all. This is the spin-off. Homes of $250,000 and upwards are excessive and designed to deliberately trap you in a cycle of debt. You've seen what's happening in California and New York. I did the piece last week, what's happening in Sydney and Melbourne. They're pushing the house prices up, knowing the poor end can't afford it. Or they carry on keeping up with the Joneses and hang a noose round the neck and saddle themselves with debt and eventually foreclosure. Once you're going into 300, 400, 500,000, unless you're earning to accommodate, which is the few, then your mortgage becomes all consuming of your capital at the expense of living. The only reason you stay in that home is because the reality is, and we've all done it, myself included, is keeping up with the Joneses. But in essence, what we're doing is feeding the debt cycle that consumes most of us. Yes, there are some pitfalls to this program, as people who have paid off homes and expecting it to sell it for, say, 300,000, and now the price is worth 100 to 150. But if you take the self out of it, think of all the people who have lost their homes due to deliberately engineered excessive prices, the reality of which, if the current system continues the way it's carrying on, you too would end up losing your home as well. The idea is to take the homes off everybody. I've heard of people who have lost their homes who are on time with the payments. Why? Because certain banks, you all know the names by now, never disperse the escrow account monies. And in some states, non-payment of property taxes can cost you your home, and has done. because the banks didn't pay the escrow. Another issue is think of all the extra costs that parents have absorbed over the last 30 years, particularly the last 15 to 20 years. And yes, I know you do it because it's your children, but keeping children in their home until the late 20s or even in their 30s or even 40 years of age in some cases is not fair on the parents, and what is worse, it's also damaging to the children, that they are still under the control of the parents and have not set out on their own journey of discovery, which enables then a lack of personal responsibility. I've watched that in my own family with my sister. With the lack of personal responsibility we see all too often in many of the youth today, and that's why. Because they've been parented for far too long. Because of the housing prices. Think of all the homeless who have no homes. In essence, aren't the children stuck under the parents' roof, also homeless in a different way, an overview way? For many years now, homes have been used as a pension scheme for old age, or something to pass on to their children. How are the children stuck in their parents' homes going to achieve that for themselves? If you're stuck in your parents at 30 and 40 and then sign up for a 30-year mortgage, you're paying that mortgage far too late in your life. And if it carries on, this generation will end that line of actions as less youths are buying homes. There's nothing to leave for the kids, because the kids are not buying any homes. What it would also do is help the local councils, as vast quantities of homes now vacant and subsequently they're not receiving property taxes on time. It's causing huge deficits in some local councils with vast quantities of foreclosed homes. So that then impacts their ability to meet the needs of running that particular county. But suddenly, with reduced prices, many of the children and the people stuck in rentals, which these days the cost of renting is way more than the cost of a mortgage for a moderately priced home, suddenly the housing market would really pick up, along with banks, mortgage companies, brokers, sellers and maintenance people would all see a massive increase in work. So that's where the spin-offs come in. But suddenly there'll be a lot of homes being sold and it generates a lot of work. Maintenance people, mortgage companies, banks, brokers and realtors. Think of the article I did in the last show about the explosion in certain regions around the world where they are pricing average folk out of whole regions of the country. In essence, they're creating their own enclaves. This plan would reverse that type of nonsense. So suddenly a home in California, instead of being an average of $675,000, the value of the home would be $125 to $175. Which makes homes available to the majority again. But the people with mortgages on those homes would see their mortgages drastically reduced and would offset future costs against the costs already paid. So suddenly you go, well, I paid $650. Well, you put a deposit down and you've made mortgage payments, but you still owe $400,000. Well, suddenly now it's worth $125,000, so you've gained $300,000. So that $300,000 that you're going to lose because you're not going to be able to sell it for that, you just saved that $300,000 and you still got your money. So there is a bit of we lose, but we also gain. It swings and roundabouts. Everyone gains in the end, because there'll be increased employment. But those with $1 million plus homes would have the biggest reduction in home value. But for many with homes in that range, in some cases have bucked the system and or abused it. Let's be honest. More than not, isn't it? So their mortgages would be reduced to $125,000, $175,000 builder's cost, and refinanced at that, which would then free up huge amounts of monthly mortgage payments and an extra many hundreds of thousands in mortgage costs reduced. This extra money that they would have each month would improve lifestyles and a future and ability to take vacations, which has suddenly become almost deleted from American society. Ability to buy better food, better lifestyle, and not saddled with all your best moments in life being wasted through a lack of funds just to pay off mortgages or rents. This then enables you to go out and enjoy life more. The extra spending that you would have will then go into the community and increase their lifestyles as well. And the problem with the current economy, the way it is a lack of flow of funds, as all of it is being funneled into their Ponzi scheme system. Boom and bust, where they then buy up everything cheap, wait till it reaches top dollar, sell it back to us, and then they do it again. Over and over again. Now, for those who ask, well, I lost my home to foreclosure. This is not helping me. I would like to remind you, so did I. Maybe there can be another proposal drafted in a later show to put those people back in homes in some way. Not necessarily the original one, but something compatible. So I hope you enjoyed those pieces. Like I said, I've got a bigger one that is in the works and could well be enacted upon. I'll know more in the next week to 10 days on that, and we'll put that in the next show. Well, we got 5 minutes to see if we can eke out a few questions. I've been noticing the gas prices going up where I live in Pennsylvania. We're at $2.93 a gallon. Is this rise in price so the cabal can keep their game going? In some aspects I would say yes. In other aspects it may be to keep the country going until September, and then perhaps we'll have real change after that. We'll see. This is Tank's article on the 17th, and here's what he wrote. Various people have said there are other sources of funds that will fund the RV. Results: every time the exchanges are supposed to begin, the non-quantum Hercules system tries to hack the trust. And that is correct. The real quantum system controls the asset redemptions from the off-ledger accounts, which are all held in the trust. Furthermore, no other real assets have materialised as of yet to explain how these redemptions will be funded. And the question is, this is where I get stuck. I understand that Kim can be the only one, or you have to have the good intentions to release the money. If that's the case, why wouldn't it have been released if these intentions are good and the system knows this? You're getting mixed up with two different items. The good intentions and certain qualities, which are only a handful of people, one handful of people have, are for the vaults that are situated all over the planet, stacked with gold. Now, some of it's the ballast for the planet and can't be moved, but only those handful are able to open certain vaults around the world. They can't be smashed into, broken into, whatever. It's got like magic connected to it. But so Kim has released funds into the system, and they either block it or try to steal it. We're still working night and day, Kim is anyway, to try and get around this problem, so the people can, and the countries and the governments can have the money to get their countries started again. But this is to do with the clowns. They just will not give up on certain top brass military are stuck up so far up their backsides they don't know where they're going. So that's where you get mixed up. Since this is a holographic reality, how is it one can touch certain textures and break one's nose while trying to walk through a wall if it's all holographic? Good question. Maybe it's not all holographic. Maybe there is some certain density, or maybe it's what we convince ourselves of. If you believe it to be, then that's what it becomes. But when you're programming into believing everything's solid, well, how can everything be solid when an atom, of which all matter is made up of, is 99.99999% space? Empty space. So this is where the holographic comes in. Now, there was an overlay that I believe went down a couple of years ago, and we are seeing the separation of that. But somehow anyway. But if you convince yourself, it's like look at the firewalkers. Most people wouldn't hover the toe of foot above the coals, never mind walk on it. If you convince yourself that they're not hot, that's how you can change reality. And people with a full-on belief system can do things which is classed as magic or impossible, or you can think, I'm possible. Why isn't Trump's Jesuit education not being addressed and or considered as a potential reason for his actions or inactions? Good question. Don't know, but my issue or my concern is not the Jesuits, it's the Zionists. And I have covered that a number of times in the show, for the last 2 years, basically. You mentioned a plan about repositioning the Earth's axis. Any idea of how long that might take? Months, years, decades? Don't know. Sorry. and that will only be announced when it's final. It's still in the works. What consequences could that have to live on Earth and on the sea levels? Sea levels the idea of it is will not be affected, and the idea of it is that everyone on Earth will benefit with a more temperate climate, which then allows for more agriculture and growing food, organic food. Any info on the chemtrails? They're still in the skies, unfortunately, and that's kind of disappointing from a Trump supporter's point of view, that he hasn't been able to stop that. Whether he's doing many things or he's not doing many things is debatable to many at the moment, but something should have been done about that, in my opinion. We're now into month 15, and yes, they have drastically reduced from what it was. I know certain people go, well, it was terrible today, but the overall spraying has reduced to what it was. Whether that's lack of funds, or they're not able to do it like they used to, or it's been counteracted too much now, remains to be seen. But Trump should have stopped it by now. Right, I think that's enough. Apologies for the ones who didn't get their questions answered. They get kept in until the next show. I hope you enjoyed the show. There's a lot in there tonight. All I can, as summing up, big progress is still being made. They are still heavily on the back foot. We don't expect them to get off that back foot. We'll expect them to topple over one day. I know we all are tired of waiting, but there's a lot that needs to be dealt with, and largely it's being dealt with behind the scenes, which frustrates some, but I think there's an awful lot if you are able to put two and two together, and I try to help with this show of connecting all the dots. There's an awful lot coming out, and there's an awful lot of investigations in the various levels of criminality that's gone on this planet, whether it be corruption and fraud, or sexuality, or pedophilia, or other heinous stuff. There's lots of stuff that needs to be prevented. There's lots of treaties that need to be looked at, cancelled and rewritten, you name it. And I mean, amongst all that, you've got a lot of chaos going on around the world, which doesn't augur too well for community spirit, and they know that. But the important thing is we continue to support each other. That's what this group's about, supporting and looking after each other. That's why we're different to most other groups, if not all. Like I said, we're all waiting for one big event to hit, of which then a number of events will follow. In essence, we have had big events. The fact that the Clinton video is now being discussed with so many is a big event in essence. Yes, the entity is still walking the streets, but once that's up to us to force the portal people into covering it. If it means tweeting and blogging them all day and shutting down their websites, then so be it. They've shut us down for long enough. Why can't we shut them down? Like I said, it doesn't require violence. Doesn't mean say you have to go on there and effing and blinding and name calling. Just state facts. Why haven't you covered this story? You are committing treason against the people. And you are also complicit by inaction. That's all you have to say. It's sufficient to be. They're going to be a lot of uncomfortable bums on seats in those media studios that the people want their heads, like the politicians. And I mean that figuratively, not literally. Suddenly they're being held accountable. They've never been held really accountable. And it's time we did. It's our news, not their news. Right, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Should I play that? No, I'll leave that for another time. Let's play... let's play this one again. One of the members' daughters that we played last week. Bring it on. I'll be back as usual next week sometime. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams.